At the outset, let me recap some of the comments Mr. Edano, Chief Cabinet Secretary, made today in his two press conferences that he held today. In the morning, at the press conference starting from around 9:40, he referred to a couple of points regarding Fukushima Daiichi. The first point is the radioactive levels of plutonium detected from soil samples taken at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant are almost the same as those from the fallout detected in the background radiation. That is the levels of plutonium detected following past nuclear tests in the atmosphere. And he further mentioned that the plutonium in question was detected probably because the nuclear power plant was hit by the major earthquake and tsunami. We'll continue to strengthen monitoring of the levels of plutonium at the periphery of the plant. And also he mentioned that the Nuclear Safety Commission and NISA are examining various options to pump out highly radioactive water that has been building up in the basement of the reactor's turbine building. And also, injecting water is critically important to cool down the reactor and prevent the fuel rods inside the reactor from being exposed above water. And it is necessary to strike a balance between removing highly radiated water leaking from the turbine building and injecting appropriate amount of water into the reactor to prevent the reactor from overheating. And lastly, he mentioned that given the facts that plutonium that may have leaked from the fuel rods at the reactor was detected, as well as highly radioactive substances were detected in the puddle at the site, the molten fuel rods might have partially melted down. And in the evening press conference starting from 4 p.m., on the issue of the Japanese government energy policy issue, he mentioned regarding the review of the basic energy plan, the Japanese government is considering further promoting the use of clean energy, such as bioenergy and solar energy. And on the nuclear power plant's safety, he mentioned METI is reviewing the safety of nuclear power plants around the nation. Based on the result of the study, the METI is examining what kind of measures should be taken. The ministry is expected to wrap it up not far in the future. And regarding those people who are working on site in Fukushima Daiichi, he mentioned nuclear power station workers on site have been working really hard, taking risks in tackling the situation, and he wholeheartedly appreciates their hard work and dedication. And also preventing the expansion or increase of the incidents at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plants has been our top priority. But we will also make efforts to improve working and living conditions of workers on site. That concludes some of my reference to Mr. Edano's press conference today. And then I'd like to turn to Mr. Nishiyama of NIST.
Thank you, Mr. Shikata. I'd like to update the status of power plants of Fukushima Daiichi. First, Unit 1. Regarding a reactor, pressure of containment vessel became stable. But pressure vessel's temperature went up. Therefore, we increased the amount of water introduced from 113 liters per minute to 141 liters per minute. The temperature this morning began to decline. we replaced fire engines with tentative electricity-driven pumps to introduce pure water today to the reactor of Unit 1. Regarding spent fuel pool of Unit 1, since we found some defects for the concrete pumping car machine, we'll repair it within a few days and we'll pour pure water, hopefully on March 31st, to the spent fuel pool of Unit 1. Regarding power restoration, we are restoring power line inside each unit regarding each unit. And regarding Unit 1, for example, we have a plan to connect cables for monitoring post of radiation and hope that we can see the monitoring data in the central controlling unit. Regarding radiated stagnant water in the turbine building, we have been pumping up the radiated water in the turbine building of the Unit 1 and put it into the hot well. We are seeing some progress in reducing the amount of water, but it may take time to finish. Regarding trench water, the water which we found in the trench attached to the plants, units 1 through 3, this water we found in the trench attached to the turbine building of Unit 1, we see little change in the depth or height of the surface of the water. We placed bags with sand inside and a concrete block to make the water not to run to the sea, even if it spills out. But we don't expect a big change in the level of surface in the water, trench water. TEPCO has been conducting the nuclide analysis of the trench water, and the results will be announced as early as tonight. Next, I'd like to explain Unit 2. Pure water, regarding a reactor, pure water introduction to the reactor of Unit 2 is now realized by tentative electricity-driven pumps instead of fire engines. Regarding spent fuel pool of Unit 2, pure water will be introduced to the spent fuel pool of Unit 2 instead of seawater as early as today. Power restoration for Unit 2, monitoring post rated electricity source and tentative cables for vital electricity source will be checked and placed. Regarding radiated water, stagnant water in the turbine building of Unit 2, we began pumping up the water, highly radiated water, in the turbine building and put it into hot well, the same as Unit 1. And regarding trench water, we found highly radiated water in the trench attached to the Unit 2. And we think that the radiation of Unit 2 trench water is higher than that of Unit 1. We think that removal of stagnant water in the turbine building may contribute to lessen the amount of water in the trench. So our first priority is to pumping up the stagnant radiated water in the turbine building. Regarding Unit 3, with respect to reactor, yesterday we began introducing pure water with tentative electricity-driven pumps to the pressured vessel of the Unit 3. Regarding a spent fuel pool, we will introduce pure water to the spent fuel pool of the Unit 3 with concrete pumping machine or card. That is from the outside. Regarding power restoration, we'll confirm or check integrity of the board carrying 125 volt power charger. Also, we'll continue to check the integrity of equipments and to restore cables. Regarding radiated water, stagnant water in the turbine building of Unit 3, we will do the same thing. We are doing the same thing as we do in the Unit 2, which is pumping up the water into the and carry it into the hot well. Regarding trench water, the same as Unit 2, which is we see no big change in the level of surface of water. Therefore, the priority is to pumping up the stagnant water in the turbine building. Unit 4. This unit, as you know, has no fuel core in the reactor because all the fuel is what has been placed in the spent fuel pool because of the exchange of shroud in the reactor. Regarding spent fuel pool of Unit 4, we switched the water source of the concrete pumping machine from seawater to pure water yesterday, which is the preparation for water introduction in the future to the spent fuel pool of Unit 4. Regarding power restoration, the lights of the central controlling unit was turned on at 11:50 today regarding Unit 4. Yes, and then lastly, I'd like to explain briefly about plutonium. Yesterday, it was confirmed that there was plutonium in the 5 samples from the soil of the Fukushima Daiichi plant. And the density of the plutonium was, however, almost equal level to the fallouts, which is radiated falling objects created by nuclear bomb tests. Therefore, our environment has no additional, almost very little additional, has very little additional effect. Therefore, it will not harm people's health. However, we will continue our monitoring. That's all for my report today. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to ask Mr. Itaru Watanabe of MEXT.
Well, as you know, MEXT conducting environmental monitoring activity around the nuclear power plants, and the papers today we provided shows the updated data of the monitoring. And I'd like to add one point. Today's paper, one item added, it is readings of integrated dose at monitoring post out of 20-kilometer zone. This shows page 10. This shows some points, several points of the accumulated or integrated dose of 5 days or 4 days or 3 days readings integrated, measured by the integrating dosimeter. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to ask Mr. Masanori Shinano of Nuclear Safety Commission to speak.
はい、それでは
Thank you. From the Secretariat of the Nuclear Safety Commission, I would like to give you the daily report concerning our evaluation of the environmental monitoring result. So the original data was released at 6:45 p.m. yesterday. And based on the data that was published by 4 p.m. yesterday, we had carried out our evaluation. I don't have much to report to you, which I believe is very good news. First of all, concerning spatial radiation dose rate, there has been no major change in the level of the spatial radiation dose rate. Secondly, the concentration of the radioactive substance in the air, this is based on the data collected until 4 p.m. The previous day, but we did not have such data available, so we don't have new evaluation result. This does not mean that monitoring was not carried out. There was no data that was made public by 4 p.m. One day prior to our evaluation. And aviation monitoring, there was no information update. Thus, we do not have new results of evaluation.
Fourth is environmental sample. Weed, pond water, and rainwater have shown relatively higher levels of radioactivity. And if you refer to the fourth paragraph under 4, this is the data that we are looking at anew. As we have reported yesterday, in the trench, they have observed water of high radioactivity, and our commission has given advice to the government yesterday. That is that in order to confirm that it is not disseminated into the air or the ambient, that they strengthened the surveillance and monitoring. As a result, iodine 131 and cesium 137, those data will be watched by our commission in the seawater, the offshore monitoring. The data that we have obtained do not suggest any harm on the human health. The fifth point is the environmental radioactivity level survey by prefecture. First, in terms of the spatial radiation dose rate, there has not been any significant change. Drinking water or tap water, we believe that we will have to continue to observe carefully the information provided by MHLW. Within the scope of the data that we have evaluated, those values are below the provisional regulated value, and all values are lower than the values that we have seen the day before, yesterday. Thank you.
Oh, no. I'd like to ask Noriko Iseki of MHLW to go next.
I would like to provide the test result reported yesterday, 28th March. In total, 27 samples are tested and reported from 5 prefectures, and none of them levels are not exceeding the maximum limits. And I have distributed one document which is on both side print, and on back side this provides the sum up of the test result since 19th March. And there is no additional reports indicating the levels exceeding the maximum limits. Thank you.
Then lastly, I'd like to ask Mr. Matsunaga for a ministry to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Shikata. As always, I would like to update you about assistance from other countries and territories. First of all, I would like to explain about new information with respect to relief supplies. Yesterday, I made a detailed explanation as to the relief supplies from China, Republic of Korea, as well as the United Kingdom. Today, I'd like to add relief supplies from other countries. Please refer to the updated chart circulated for you. We added relief supplies from Mexico as well as United Kingdom, but without going into details about the matrix, I'd like to give you latest information as to the relief supplies. India yesterday provided 10 tons of biscuit. It is an additional relief supply provided by the Republic of India. They have already provided a lot of blankets as well as water, drinking water. Those 10 tons of biscuit heads to Miyagi Prefecture. Bangladesh is providing 2,000 blankets as well as 500 pairs of boots, as well as 1,000 pairs of rubber gloves on the date of 31st. The packaged power station provided by the Republic of Korea, which I explained yesterday, is scheduled to arrive Hanegasaki of Chiba Prefecture. Those packaged power stations are designed to provide electricity for as many as 8,000 households. And lastly, with respect to relief supply, I would like to mention about the contribution of the UNHCR. They are to provide 1,000 and about 1,800 of solar lamps. Please refer to the sheet, which give you the pictures of those solar lamps. They are to arrive in Ishinomaki City tomorrow. And in addition, I'd like to mention about the countries and territories which I haven't mentioned as to what which have provided monetary donation. They are Equatorial Guinea, Georgia, Rwanda, and Taiwan. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to ask. Now I'd like to open the floor to for questions. When you ask a question, please identify yourself with your name and affiliation, and please limit your question to only one question per time. どうぞ。
中国地方テレビのリーと申しますけれども、西山さんに聞きたいんですけれど、今ですね、高い濃度のプリトリウム検出されましたけれども、今対策としては、一番ですね、急いで取り上げる言葉何だと思いますかね。
高いレベルのごめんなさい。高いレベルの何とおっしゃいます。プルトニウム。プルトニウム。中国中央テレビのものですけれども、西山審議会に質問があります。今、高いレベルのプルトニウムが検出されたと おっしゃいましたけれども、対策としてはまず急いで取らなきゃならない対策としてはどういったものがあるでしょうか。あ、ごめんなさい。Excuse me. Central Chinese TV. Question to Mr. Nishiyama. You mentioned earlier that you detected a high level of plutonium, and as countermeasures to deal with the plutonium, what are measures that you need to take urgently?
今の少し誤解がありまして、まず検出されたプルトニウムの濃度は、環境中に存在する大気圏内の核実験による、フォールアウトの影響と同じレベルのものです。したがって、これは周辺環境あるいは人間に悪影響を及ぼさないものと考えています。
There seems to be some misunderstanding. The level of plutonium that has been detected is around the same level as the fallout into the environmental atmosphere as a result of nuclear tests. And it is a level that would not have any adverse effect on the surrounding environment or on human health.
Richard Lloyd Parry of the Times. Question for Mr. Nishiyama. Could you give us some idea of the amount of water that's going in and out of the plant? So in other words, what volume are you putting in to cool the reactors, say over 24 hours? How much are you taking out of the pools and puddles and trenches at the bottom? And is the overall level of water, of radioactive water at the bottom, the water that's causing the problem, is the overall level increasing or decreasing or remaining the same?
タイムズのものですけれども、西山審議官に質問です。大体の感触として伺いたいんですけれども、原発に出入りしている水の量というのはどのぐらいあるんでしょうか。例えばですから冷却のためにどのぐらいの、例えば24時間でどのぐらいの量の水が投入されているんでしょうか。そして今度は逆に下の方から、プールとかあるいはトレンチとかあるいは水たまりなどから出てきている水というのはどのぐらいあるんでしょうか。でその地下などから出てきている水の全体の放射能レベルは下がっているんでしょうか、上がっているんでしょうか、それとも大体一定なんでしょうか。
まず、我々としては燃料を常に冷やしておくと、水を満たして冷やしておくということだけは必ず実現しなければいけません。これは使用済み燃料プールについても、それから原子炉についても同じです。
First of all, we have to make sure that we always cool the fuel by filling it with water, and that is for the spent fuel pool as well as for the reactor itself.
ですからこれに必要な水はどうしても注ぎ込まなければならないということと、それから現時点ではたまり水の量はどのくらいかということははっきりは分かりません。で我々はまずなるべく多くのポンプを導入して、そのたまり水を抜くことによって水がどういうふうに流れてくるのかを把握して対策を考えたいと思っています。
And at the current time, we are not sure about the volume of the stagnant water. And what we are doing now is to introduce as many pumps as possible to pump out the stagnant water, to be able to know how the water is flowing and to come up with measures to deal with that issue.
でその冷却、水を注ぎ込むことによる冷却がうまくいっていれば、放射能レベルについてはもちろんこれまでに燃料が損傷した分についてはそれがまた出てくることはあるかもしれませんけれども、それ以上の新しいものの発生を防げると思っています。
And as long as we can cool the reactor and the spent fuel pool by injecting adequate water, while the radiation that has been created up to now from the damage to the fuel up to now may still continue to ooze out a little bit, at least by cooling with the injection of water, we will be able to prevent the generation of any new radiation.
Sorry, may I follow that up? On the question of the water in the trench, you said that you're putting up concrete blocks and sandbags around the mouth of that trench to prevent any overspill into the ocean. Does that mean that the level of water in that trench is still rising?
関連質問ですけれども、先ほどトレンチのその出口のところにコンクリートあるいは土のうを積むことによってトレンチの中の水が海に流れ出すのを防いでいるとおっしゃいましたけれども、ということはトレンチの中の水 the water level is still increasing, did you say?
Yes.
トレンチの中の水のレベルはまだ上昇し続けているんでしょうか。
今我々が目で見ている範囲では水位の変化はありません。これは1号から3号まで同じです。しかし1号の場合に一番水面、現在の水面から溢れ出るまでに 0.1 メートルしか余裕がないので、そのために1号機については万一溢れた時のための対策を打っているということです。
To the extent that we can see visually by our eyes, there is no change in the water level in the trench for all the 3 units, 1, 2, and 3. And in the case of unit number 1, the current level of water is a level in which there is only 0.1 meters until it overflows. And that is why for unit number 1, we are taking measures in case the level of water reaches a level that may cause it to overflow.
Next question.
もう一つ言ったこと、もう一つ言えばいいですか。先ほど私の説明の時にうまく言えなかったかもしれないので確認しておきますと、そのたまり水を汲み出す作業は現在1号機が最も進んでいますけれども、2号機、3号機とも作業には着手しております。始まっております。
And let me make one clarification just in case my earlier explanation was not clear. The work of pumping out the stagnant water is most advanced in unit number 1. However, we have already started pumping out the stagnant water both for units number 2 and 3 as well.
Rick.
Thank you, Rick Wallace from the Australian newspaper. It's a question for Mr. Nishiyama. I'm wondering if you can tell us what specific problem or which specific reactor poses the greatest threat that you believe at the plant, and if you could also tell us whether the spent fuel pools on reactor 3 and 4 are actually holding water, or is the water you spray on them sort of passing straight through them?
オーストラリアニュースペーパーのものですけれども、西山審議官にお尋ねします。具体的にどの原子炉のどの具体的な問題が最も大きな脅威だとお考えでしょうか。それと3号機と4号機の使用済み燃料プールは水を保持することができているんでしょうか。それとも放水した水はもう素通りして流れ出ているんでしょうか。
今の段階ではどの1号機から3号機まで、どの、原子炉においても燃料は一部損傷しております。それから格納容器などの、漏れもどの機についてもある可能性が高いです。そういう意味で今どの原子炉が一番問題というふうにはなかなか順番がつけにくくて、どれについてもしっかり冷却を図っていかなきゃいけないという段階です。
At the present stage, in all of the reactors, from units 1 through 3, there is some damage to the fuel. And also, for the containment vessel and others as well, there is a high possibility that there is some leakage for all of these units. And so, at the present moment, we cannot attach any order of importance regarding all of these reactors. All I can say is that we have to make sure to cool all of the reactors.
それから3号機と4号機の使用済み燃料プールには今は水が保たれていると、その中に使用済み燃料が収まっていると考えています。
And regarding the spent fuel pool of units 3 and 4, the spent fuel pool is able to hold water, and the spent fuel is submerged in the water.
リーさん。
香港フェニックステレビのリーと申します。西山審議官にお伺いしたいと思います。今たまり水の方から1000ミリシーベルトを検出されたということなんですけれども、これらのたまり水が置いてある建坑の扉11箇所が津波の中ですでになくなってしまっているといった情報があります。この情報は正確かどうか、そしてこのたまり水がまだ海の方に流れ込まれていないのかどうか、もし確証があれば教えてください。
I am Lee from Hong Kong Phoenix TV. I have a question to Mr. Nishiyama. At the moment, there has been a level of 1,000 millisieverts detected from the stagnant water. And we have information that the doors for the building, 11 doors for the building, the turbine building, has been lost due to the tsunami. Can you confirm whether this information is accurate? And also, if you have any information for sure that the stagnant water is not yet flowing into the sea, could you tell us?
まずタービン建屋の中にある溜まった水と、それからトレンチの中にある水とが、同じ水であるかどうかは今のところまだはっきり分かりません。これについては今各種分析をして確認中です。
First of all, at the moment, we do not know for sure whether the stagnant water in the turbine building is the same as the stagnant water found in the trench. And we are currently doing nuclide analysis to confirm whether the stagnant water in these two places are the same.
しかし確かに2号機の
Having said so, however, it is also true that both the stagnant water in the turbine building and the stagnant water in the trench shows a reading of more than 1,000 millisieverts on the surface of the water. So it is highly likely that it is the same water. Excuse me, in the case of unit number 2. Excuse.
それでそういうことを前提に、まずその立て坑のところの扉は、11箇所だったかどうか記憶がはっきりしませんけれども、多くが津波で、壊されてしまっているというふうには聞いています。
And on that premise, I don't, regarding the door that we have on the vertical shaft, I'm not sure whether it was 11 doors or not, but it is true that many doors on the vertical shaft has been destroyed by the tsunami.
それでいやそれは他のものも含めてです。
The point I made about the door to the vertical shaft is not only unit number 2, but for other units as well.
それでそのトレンチの水が海に流れ込んだかどうかはそれは今分かりません。流れ込んだというデータは特にありません。
And regarding the latter part of your question, as whether the water from the trench has actually flowed into the sea or not, we don't know whether it has flowed into the sea or not, but we do not have any data that shows that it has flowed into the sea.
関連ですけれども、ちょっと関連ですけれども、流れ込んでいない根拠はあるんでしょうか。
If I may ask a related question, do you have any grounds for saying that the water from the trench is not flowing into the sea?
それも明確にはありません。ただ海水のサンプリング調査によってはそれほど高い値は出ていませんけれども、今のご質問に対する答えは今明らかではありません。
In response to that question as well, we do not have any clear grounds at the moment. But as far as we can see from the monitoring of samples from the seawater, high doses are not detected. But of course, we cannot say anything for sure.
Okay. どうぞ。
ダウ・ジョーンズの大沢と申します。今の状況ですね、燃料を冷却するために水を注がなければいけないということと、ただその汚染された水がもっと流れ出るのを減らさなければいけないという2つの、ちょっと矛盾した課題があって、そのバランスを取るのがすごく難しい状況に見えるんですけれども、まずそのどちらを優先するのかということは、その冷却の方があくまで優先だということは間違いないんでしょうか。
I am Osawa from Dow Jones. When we look at the current situation, I understand that you have to inject water in order to cool the fuel, but at the same time, you have to reduce the flow of contaminated water into the sea, or you have to reduce any possibility of contaminated water flowing into the sea. And it seems to be rather difficult to be able to address these two contradicting objectives. Which of the two do you give more priority to? May I understand that the priority is on cooling the fuel?
我々は今おっしゃった通り、まずその燃料をしっかり冷やして、これ以上の燃料の損傷は避けるというのが一番のプライオリティだと思っています。でそれができる範囲で、もう一つのたくさんの放射性の水が 出てくることをなるべくそれを少なくするために水の量を絞るということは考えています。
Yes, as you have mentioned just a moment ago, our number one priority is to cool the fuel, first and foremost, to avoid any more damage to the fuel. And to the extent that we are able to meet that objective, we intend to also deal with the other objective of trying not to release large amounts of radiated water, and in order to meet that objective, we will try to reduce the amount of water to the extent that we can.
それで今のに関わってちょっとすみません、一つなんですが、その状況を、根本的に解決するための方法は、汚染された水を一度に大量に取り除く手段や設備を用意するしかないのではという見方もあると思うんですが、そういったことも準備これからできるのかということについてお伺いしたいんですが。
Probably the only measure that can be taken as a basic solution to that issue is to find some way of removing large amounts of contaminated water at once. And do you think that can be arranged?
それはそういう方法が見つけられれば非常にいいと思います。で、我々は今近くにあるタンクを使った形でのやり方を考えていますけれども、また、仮にこの今の方法の進捗を見ながらまた別の方法も考えなければならないかもしれません。そこは今は分かりません。
It would be very good if we can find a means of doing so. And what we are considering at the moment is the method of using tanks that we have nearby. And looking at the progress and evolution of the approach that we are now taking, we may have to consider a different approach. We don't know.
Okay, next question. どうぞ。
BNA の有田です。今のこの問題の対応をですね、冷やすことを優先的にというふうにおっしゃったけれども、西山さんに対しての質問です。もしこの冷やすことが失敗した場合はですね、次のベストプラクティスというのはどんなことになるんですか。そしてまた再び温度が上がったら何が次のステージで起こるんでしょ
う。I am Arita. In dealing with this issue, you mentioned, this question is to Mr. Nishiyama. You mentioned that your first priority is cooling. If the cooling fails, what would be the next best practice? And if the temperature starts to rise again, what is going to happen in the next stage?
この今の燃料の冷却がうまくいかなければ、燃料の破損が進んでしまって、そこからその燃料の中に含まれているさまざまな放射性物質が外に出てきてしまうということになりますから、それが一番避けなければいけないと思います。 ですから我々はその点については失敗しないようにやりたいと思っています。
In response to that question, if the cooling of the fuel does not work out, and if we are not successful in cooling the fuel, the damage, there will be even greater damage done to the fuel, leading to a release of the various radioactive materials that are included within the fuel. And that would be something that we would like to avoid the most. That must be avoided the most. And so we intend to cool the fuel in a way that we would not fail.
Next question, Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Chandler with the Washington Post. And one little question and a regular question. How deep is the water in the turbine rooms? Is it like waist high, or how many meters high is it? And also, there was a press conference yesterday, I believe, given by a nuclear regulator who talked about the working conditions at the plant and talked about the fatigue of the workers, the very long hours they're working, and limited food. And I was hoping you could talk about, Mr. Nishiyama, about what you have observed if you've been there, or what you think is the status of the health and safety of the workers on the plant.
ワシントン・ポストのものですけれども、一つ簡単な質問と、もう一つ通常の質問があるんですけれども、まずタービン建屋に溜まっている水の深さはどのぐらいなんでしょうか。腰ぐらいまであるんでしょうか。何メーターぐらいの水がタービン建屋に溜まっているんでしょうか。それがちょっと簡単な方の質問で、もう一つの本格的な質問は、昨日、原子力規制担当官の記者会見で、原子力発電所における作業条件、労働条件が非常に労働条件に関して話をされていて、作業員は疲れているし、長時間働いているし、食料なども限られているというような話、労働条件に関するそういった話があったんですけれども、西山審議会に伺いたいのは、もしご自身の目でいらして実際にご覧になっているのであれば、どういう状況か教えていただきたいですし、もしそうじゃない場合にしても、作業員の健康と安全に関してはどういう状況だとお考えでしょうか。
まずたまり水の深さについては、これははっきりしたことが分かりません。暗いということもありますし、場所によっていろいろなレベルがあるようなので、はっきりしたことが分かりません。
In response to the first part of your question about the depth of the stagnant water in the turbine building, we don't know for sure about the depth of the water, in part because of the darkness, because it is dark inside, and also because there seems to be different levels of water depending on the place.
それから作業している方々の疲れの問題、それから働く環境の問題については、昨日のレポートを私も聞きました。それで非常に苦労されていることはよくわかるので、我々はぜひ結構長く、まだこれからも今までも長かったし、これからもある程度時間を要する可能性もありますから、この作業する方の食料とか休息とかよく配慮するように東京電力と相談をしています。
And in response to your second part of the question regarding the fatigue and working conditions of the workers, I also heard the report that was given yesterday, and we know very well, we are very aware that the workers are having a hard time. It is already a considerable long time since the work began, and there is a possibility that the work is still going to take a certain amount of time. And I have discussed with TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, regarding giving due consideration to the supply of food and providing time for rest for the workers.
Next question. Terrell? Please go ahead. Yeah.
Terrell Jones from Reuters. I wanted to ask Mr. Nishiyama if you could clarify again and explain, be a little more detail what you said about the plutonium that was detected. You said it was, I'm not sure I understood right. You said it was similar to what the fallout would be from a nuclear test. Do you mean an atmospheric test or an underground test? And if it's in either case, that level is equivalent to being how far from the center of such a test? I think you said 4 rads. And was there an issue about whether it was plutonium was discovered in 2 samples out of 5 samples, or did you say 4 samples? I just wonder if you could sort of go through that again and give us the detail about that. And I did have one follow-up after that.
ロイターズのものですけれども、西山審議官に質問があります。検出されたプルトニウムに関してもう少し明確に詳しくお聞きしたいんですけれども、私は正しく理解したかどうか分かりませんけれども、先ほどのお話では、検出されたプルトニウムは、核実験の際のフォールアウトと大体同じぐらいとおっしゃいましたけれども、これは大気中の核実験の場合ですか、それとも地下核実験の場合でしょうか。でいずれの場合だとしても、そのレベルというのは実験の中心地からどのぐらいの距離の地点でのレベルと同じとおっしゃったんでしょうか。確か4ラッドとおっしゃったような気がしたんですけれども、それとプルトニウムが検出されたのは5つの資料サンプルのうちの2件とおっしゃいましたか、4件とおっしゃいましたか。もう少しその辺詳しく教えていただけますでしょうか。
まず土壌から採取した5つの検体からそれぞれにプルトニウムが確認されています。
First of all, from 5 samples that have been taken from the soil, plutonium was detected in each of the samples.
そのプルトニウムの濃度は、環境中に存在する大気圏内の核実験による放射性の効果物の影響と思われるレベルと同程度であります。でこの場合の大気圏内の核実験は、だから遠くで行われた核実験で、直接の影響はなく、この、プルトニウムが少量含まれている今我々が住んでいる環境のことを言っています。
And regarding the level of plutonium, I mentioned that the level of plutonium that was detected is the level that is normally found in an atmosphere as a radioactive fallout at around the same level as in the case of a atmospheric nuclear test. And when I say an atmospheric nuclear test, I mean a nuclear test that was done far away and that would not have any direct effect and in which the level of plutonium would be very small. In other words, what I mean is it would be around the same level as the environment in which we normally live in.
それでそのことについて書いた資料がこのメティの資料の最後に閉じてありますので、それをご覧いただきたいと思います。
there's a document or a description about the point I have made on the very last page of the documents that have been distributed from METI, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. So can you please refer to the last page of our news release? Tateno, the vertical one.
Vertical one with two maps.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I just want to follow up also with a question to Nishiyama-san and also the is it, Deputy Cabinet Secretary?
関連質問、西山さんと、あと石方さんに関連質問があります。
And that is, I don't exactly understand the reasons that the evacuation radius has not been expanded to 30 kilometers. I mean, that's been a debate over the last several days. You know, should it be increased from 20 to 30? So my question to both of you is why has it not? And what is the latest thinking on what change might occur? And I add also that groups such as Greenpeace have tested what they say is 40 kilometers out and found reported alleged high levels of radiation. So if you could tell us your thinking.
なぜ避難範囲、避難地域が30キロまで拡大されていないのか、その理由が私には理解できません。この避難地域を20キロから30キロに拡大すべきではないかという話はこの数日間だいぶ議論になってきていると思うんですけれども、なぜ依然として30キロに避難地域が拡大されていないのでしょうか。それと何かこれに関して変更が行われるのか、最新の考え方を伺いたい。なんか最新の考え方などはあるんでしょうか。それとグリーンピースが彼らが言うには40キロ地点でテストをして相当高いレベルの放射能レベルを検出したと報告しているんですけれども、
まず今我々はその20キロを設定した時の想定が変わっていないと思っていますので、20キロのままでいいと考えています。それで現在空間の線量も少し減ってきていますから、まだ発電所の方は必ずしも落ち着いていませんけれども、この避難の範囲で十分だと考えています。
First of all, we consider that what we had expected at the time we designated an evacuation area of 20 kilometers has not changed, basically, even now. And so we consider that an evacuation area of a radius of 20 kilometers is all right, still holds at the present moment. And actually, the level of radiation in the air, in the atmosphere, is gradually starting to decline. And so while the situation at the nuclear power station itself has not yet stabilized, the level of radiation in the air is slightly declining. And so we consider that an evacuation area of 20 kilometers would be adequate.
で20キロから30キロの間におられる方々には今屋内に退避していただくようにお願いしていますけれども、これによって生活の不便があることが予想されるので、その場合には自発的にその30キロよりも外に行っていただくということをお話しているところです。
And also, we are urging residents in the area between 20 to 30 kilometers to stay indoors and take shelter indoors. However, we do anticipate that this may lead to some inconveniences in their daily lives. So in case the residents in the area between 20 to 30 kilometers feel inconvenience in staying indoors, we are suggesting that in that case they voluntarily move outside the 30-kilometer area.
それからグリーンピースのデータについては測定の仕方も我々はよく分かりませんし必ずしも信頼できないものと思っております。
And regarding the data made public by Greenpeace, we do not know the actual method they used for their measurement, and we consider that the data that they have made public is not necessarily reliable.
Let me just add that in line with what Mr. Nishiyama mentioned, we think the current measure is appropriate, but at the same time, we, as has been explained by our colleague from MEXT, we are monitoring the radiation levels in that vicinity very closely, and we take appropriate actions according to the environment being emerging. And also regarding the news release that Mr. Nishiyama mentioned, I think this news release is titled "Regarding the detection of radioactive material in the soil on the site of Fukushima Daiichi." And if you turn the page, there is a reference in the fourth bullet, which I quote, "The density of detected plutonium is equivalent to the density in the soil under normal environmental conditions and therefore poses no major impact on human health." Okay, we are running out of time. Last two questions, Richard and Michael.
A question, I suppose this is for Mr. Shikata, about the evacuation zone. What is the legal basis of the evacuation zones? In other words, do the authorities have any powers to require people to keep to these 20 and 30 kilometer demarcations, or does this in fact represent no more than a strong request for people to cooperate? And a rather small technical question for Mr. Nishiyama about the white suits which we see the workers in the plant wearing. What exactly are those white suits and what kind of protection do they provide?
まず、四方さんにご質問ですけれども、避難地域に関するご質問です。この避難地域の法的根拠は何なんでしょうか。それと当局はその住民を20キロあるいは30キロ圏内に入れないように義務付ける権限というのはあるんでしょうか。それとも単に協力を強く要請するというもの以上のものではないということなんでしょうか。次に西山審議官に技術的な質問なんですけれども、作業員がプラントの中で原発の中で着ているスーツです、あれは何なんでしょうか。でどういう保護を提供するものなんでしょうか。
私の方からお答えします。まず、避難地域の根拠法は原子力防災法という法律です。
Then let me respond to those questions. First of all, the legal basis for the evacuation is the nuclear regulation law.
それでその法律に基づいて、原子力安全委員会が屋内退避とかそれから避難に関するガイドラインを作っていて、それに基づいて一定の線量が予想されるところに 設定するようになっています。
And based on that law, NISA, the Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency, has developed a guideline for in-house shelter and evacuation. And based on this guideline, when a certain dose level is expected, the evacuation zone or in-house shelter zone will be established.
それからその避難の地域は法的な義務であります。
And also, when an area is designated as an evacuation area, the people living in that area are obligated to abide by the evacuation.
これはアメリカの場合と同じようなやり方だと思っています。それから作業員の方が着ているものは、タイベックスーツという放射性物質が皮膚につかないようにする、スーツと、それから内部に放射性物質を取り込まないようにするための全面マスクというマスクです。
The interpreter would like to make one correction. The legal basis for the evacuation area is the Act on Special Measures Concerning Nuclear Emergency Preparedness. Act on Special Measures Concerning Nuclear Emergency Preparedness. And if I may continue with my response, the approach that we are taking is the same as the approach that is taken in the United States. And the suits that the workers are wearing is called the Tyvek suit. It prevents the radioactive material becoming attached to the skin, and also it comes with a full face mask in order to prevent the ingestion of any radioactive material. And excuse me, another correction. And based on that law, the Nuclear Safety Commission develops the guidelines. Excuse the interpreter. I think the interpreter said NISA earlier, but I would like to correct that too. It is a Nuclear Safety Commission that develops the guidelines.
Let me just supplement that regarding the original kind of legal basis. The current instruction was issued by Prime Minister on the 15th of March from Prime Minister to Governor of Fukushima and other relevant mayors and mayors in Fukushima Prefecture. And this is based on the Article 15 of Special Measures Law on nuclear disaster response. Thank you.
If people are obligated to comply with these evacuation areas, why are there still people in that area, as we've seen on television and in the media?
でもし、避難地域に指定された場合、避難が義務付けられているのであれば、なぜテレビとかマスコミで依然としてその避難地域に人が住んでいるんでしょうか。
その人たちも本当は避難しなくちゃいけないんですけれども、日本の場合はそれ以上に強制的にそういう方々を連れ出すというようなことはしないことに今はしています。
The people living in that area ought to evacuate, but in the case of Japan, we do not take any coercive measures to make the people move.
So very last question from Michael Penn.
Yes, I'm Michael Penn of Press TV and the Shingetsu News Agency. This is more of a kind of a political question, and I realize there are no politicians up at the board, but it regards some comments that came out, I believe, yesterday and today about TEPCO. Mr. Aidano, the Chief Cabinet Secretary, apparently said that the nationalization of TEPCO is not being considered at the current time. But Kyodo News reported earlier today that Mr. Gemba, the National Strategy Minister, said it is an option in this case. So my question basically is twofold. Is the nationalization of TEPCO being considered by the government at all at this time? And if it is, what would be the justification? And if it's not, why not?
Press TV および信越通信社ですけれども、これは政治的な質問なんですけれども、今、壇上には政治家はいらっしゃらないんですけれども、昨日、今日と東電に関してのコメントに関する質問なんですけれども、枝野長官は現時点では東電の国有化は考えていないとおっしゃいましたけれども、共同通信の報告によると、戦略担当の現場大臣はこの場合一つのオプションであるということをおっしゃったそうなんですが、それに関して私は2つほど伺いたいんですけれども、現在東電の国有化が検討されているのかどうか、国有化されるとしたらその正当化の根拠、その正当化の根拠は何なのか、そしてもし国有化されないとしたらなぜ国有化されないんでしょうか。
これは政治的な問題ですので、我々がお答えするのはちょっとどうかと思いますけれども、私の理解では、現在東京電力の国有化について、日本政府が考えているということは私は承知しておりません。
Since this is a political question, I really wonder if I should be the one to respond to this question. But as far as I understand, the Japanese government, I do not know of any situation where the Japanese government is considering the nationalization of TEPCO at the current moment.
今やるべきことはまずこの事態を落ち着かせることであって、それに東京電力も政府も全力を挙げているところです。
What we should be doing at the moment is to stabilize the situation, and both TEPCO and the Japanese government is doing everything we can to stabilize the situation.
And I may just add that Mr. Edana, as you are probably aware, that he mentioned that along the line that he is not aware of the examination to nationalize TEPCO at this juncture. Yeah. Okay. Let us conclude today's briefing, and I guess we will be having a similar press briefing most likely tomorrow. Thank you very much for coming.